The real question isn't, what did I see after I died? The real question is, why would someone who didn't believe in anything survive, just to return and describe an experience that no language can truly capture? I was the guy who made the call to say someone didn't make it. One deep breath, one cold condolence, 1 minute of silence, and then back to the next task. For me, death had always been a biological event. The heart stops. The brain goes flat. Everything else was just folklore we invented to soften the fear. I was a paramedic. I was trained to keep people alive, not to talk about the afterlife. Faith, that was a personal choice. And I chose what I could see, touch, and measure. That's what I used to believe. Until the day I died. My name is Matthew Reed. I spent 20 years as a paramedic, watching more than 300 people take their final breath in my hands. I had lifted them, performed CPR, shocked their hearts, prayed silently, then wiped their closed eyes with a quiet reverence. But I never imagined that one day, the person lying there would be me. The name read aloud on the death report was Matthew. The one pushed on the stretcher was me. The one wrapped in a cold, sterile sheet, stripped of everything that was me. That day, I was still in uniform, still wearing my rescue radio, still carrying the habit of keeping emotions separate from duty. It was a routine call, a residential basement, damp, with a faulty electrical system. I was trying to pull a child away from a dangerous spot. I didn't touch the wire, but the current found me, as if it had chosen me. In a split second, it felt like my body exploded from the inside out. Everything went black, but not like falling asleep. It was like being torn out of myself, ripped into a space where nothing could be held onto. They said my heart stopped for 11 minutes. But to me, it wasn't 11 minutes. It was another lifetime, another dimension, something I never believed in, never named, never imagined I'd have to face. If you're someone like I was, rational, skeptical, uncomfortable with talk of death, I get it. I do. I was you. But now, I can't go back to who I was before. What do you believe happens after death? Darkness? Light? Judgment? I used to pick the first answer. But what I saw was nothing like that. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't mystical. It was so real, it undid me. And next, I'll tell you what happens when you no longer have a name, a profession, a body to rely on, or even memories to remind you who you are. When all of that is stripped away, are you still you? It happened so fast, I didn't even have time to panic. There was no thunder, no lightning, just a soft pop like plugging into the wrong outlet, followed by a sudden, total silence that swallowed the entire world. No pain, no fire, just the strange sensation of my whole body being yanked backward, like a balloon whose string had snapped in the middle of an invisible storm. I don't remember falling. I didn't hear anyone calling my name. I didn't see anyone rushing toward me. All I knew was, I wasn't there anymore. There was a moment so strange when I realized I had fallen out of myself. I couldn't move my arms or legs, yet I still existed. I no longer had eyes, yet I could see myself lying on the floor. One leg was bent awkwardly, my head tilted to the side. A colleague rushed over, defibrillator pads in hand, yelling, "Matthew!" But I didn't hear his voice in my ears. I heard it with something shapeless, a vague knowing, as if everything was echoing inside a hollow bell. I felt like I was floating, no sense of body, not cold, not warm, no weight, as if I had become smoke, or wind, or space. I thought, is this a dream? But it wasn't. Dreams had never been this vivid, never this sharp. I could see every detail, down to the strands of my hair, still faintly smoldering. I wanted to scream, but I had no mouth. I wanted to turn away, but I had no head. I was no longer a body. I was aware of drifting. A formless existence. Then I was pulled, not flying but sliding, like falling down a tunnel with no bottom. And strangely, I wasn't afraid. Not at all. Instead, there was a profound stillness. No voices, no noise. And yet, I could hear something deep, a whisper without words, not spoken to my ears, but spoken into the very core of my being. I don't know how long I was there. There was no clock, no time, nothing to hold on to and no need to. I no longer felt any urge to go back or move forward. Everything just was. No struggle, no escape, just an infinite space with no edges. And in that place, I wasn't sure I was still me. If you ask me what I was thinking in that moment, I wasn't thinking anything at all. I had lost the ability to think in the way humans do. All the usual emotions, fear, hope, and the instinct to hold on had been stripped away. It was as if every layer had been peeled off, every role, every identity, and what remained was pure presence. I had heard stories about the light, about heaven, about familiar souls waiting to welcome you. But I saw none of that. Just a deep gray. Not black, not white, but a space so still, so silent, it left me uncertain whether I was still alive or had completely disappeared. I used to think I was strong, but now I know nothing makes you feel smaller than the moment you no longer have a body, and yet still exist. And perhaps the strangest part of all was this: I no longer remembered I was Matthew. That name meant nothing in this space. But just when I thought I had completely dissolved, something began to shift. A movement not of shape or sound or direction, but something that made my entire being tremble with awareness. And in the next part, I'll tell you where I went after I was no longer human. I didn't know if I was going up or down. I wasn't even sure if I was moving or if space itself was stretching and folding around me. Every sense of direction, gravity, or self had been emptied, as if someone had blown away every concept I had ever carried from the human world. I was no longer a person. I was simply aware. A presence thin as mist, clear as wind, still as stone. The space around me had no color, and yet it held every shade of silence. There was no music, but I could hear a rhythm that needed no sound. There were no faces, but I could feel myself being seen by something that had no eyes, no form, yet somehow knew me. Knew me beyond my name, beyond anything I had ever used to define myself. It didn't speak, but I understood. It didn't ask, but I felt completely exposed, nothing left to hide. There was no judgment, no blame, no demand for explanation, just the act of being fully, utterly seen. And that was what undid me. I used to believe I was Matthew Reed, a strong, independent man, logical, grounded, respected in my profession, dismissive of anything spiritual. But here, in this formless, wordless place, the name Matthew had nowhere left to cling to. It fell off me like an old shirt, and I realized I had never really known who I was. I had just been so busy playing roles that I forgot there was something underneath. This space wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It wasn't heavy or light. It just was, like a bottomless ocean, a sky without edges, a realm where nothing was, in truth, everything. There came a moment when I thought I had completely merged with it. No more boundary between me and the infinite. No more questions. No more memories. No more time. And strangely, I felt freer than I ever had. No anxiety. No pain. No need to be anyone. No need to prove anything. No self left to pity or to punish. And in that dissolution, I encountered something no one had ever taught me to name: unconditional love. Not love coming from someone. Not love directed toward someone. But love as a state of being. As if the entire space was woven from a primordial love, pure, unbound, asking for nothing in return. I used to think love was an action, a word, a responsibility, a sacrifice. But in that space, I came to understand real love is when you are fully present without needing to wear any armor. And only when we are no longer ourselves do we finally touch it. I didn't want to go back. I had no reason to leave that place. There was no body to return to, no life left to cling to. But then something began to shift, gently, like a thin breeze pushing from within. Not a command, but a remembering. I didn't know what I was remembering, but I knew somewhere deep inside me, something still needed to be said. A word left unspoken, a circle left open, a gaze not yet met for the last time. And in that moment, for the first time since dying, I felt the desire to return. And it was in that exact instant that the impossible happened. My body, lying cold in the emergency room, began to show signs of life again. But I did not return as the man I was. I came back as someone who now knew I had died. And I had seen what waits for us, when we are no longer anyone at all. No one said anything to me, but I understood everything. There were no voices, no whispers, no language. And yet, layers of awareness began to unfold within me, one after another, like waves touching memories I didn't know I still carried. Not memories in pictures, but memories in feeling. I was shown my life not in linear time, but in moments. Moments I had missed. Moments I had avoided. Moments where I had failed to be fully present. I saw myself standing beside my dying father, just before he passed. He was lying in his hospital bed, and I was hurrying out for my next shift. I saw his eyes follow me as I left the room, not with anger, not with blame, just the silent hope that I might stay a little longer. I wasn't judged for leaving, but I felt the full weight of that unspoken sorrow, condensed in his final gaze. I saw myself with my wife, tired, distracted, sometimes snapping at her out of fatigue. And I saw clearly, each time I wasn't truly there, she stepped back just a little. Not out of anger, but from quiet hurt. I was shown every small moment how I looked at a homeless man on the street, the expression I gave to a medical student during training, even the subtle pride I held in thinking of myself as a rescuer. All of it brought into light not to shame me, but to help me see. Every action leaves a ripple. Not always outside, but inside. I wasn't interrogated, but I had to answer. Not with words, but with feeling. And that's when I realized something no classroom, no religion, no textbook had ever taught me. We are not here to succeed. We are not here to be right. We are not here to stand out. We are here to learn how to be present with love in the smallest, quietest moments. And if I missed that, then even if I saved 100 lives, I was still living without truly being alive. Still playing the part of the good man, but forgetting the man within. That moment broke me open. Even without tears, I wept. Because I felt my entire shell, one I had called professionalism, strength, male logic, crack and fall away. And what remained was a raw, uncertain, fragile version of myself. But it was honest. It was the truest Matthew I had ever known. I used to think forgiveness was something we give to others. But in that place, I came to understand true forgiveness begins with learning to look at yourself, without turning away. I no longer fear death. What I fear now is living endlessly inside the shell of being productive, capable, correct, without truly loving, without daring to listen, without slowing down long enough to look someone in the eyes and ask, "Are you okay?" I'm not sure what exactly compelled me to return to my body. Maybe it was all the things I hadn't yet lived fully. The people I never apologized to. The hands I never held long enough. The silences I never dared to sit still in. And then, I began to come back. Not by force of will, but by something infinitely tender, something that gently guided me toward life again, like the hand of a mother resting on the forehead of her lost child. But the hardest part wasn't dying. The hardest part was coming back with everything I had just seen, knowing no one else would fully understand what I had been through. And the next part of my story is where I opened my eyes, returned to my body, and realized I was no longer the same Matthew Reed I had been the day before. When I opened my eyes, the first light I saw wasn't the light of truth. It wasn't the calm, infinite stillness I had just come from. It was the harsh, fluorescent glare of the ER ceiling. The sharp beeping of machines pierced the air, and the frantic face of a nurse hovered above me, performing one last resuscitation protocol. I didn't return gently. I was hurled back like a shattered fragment, crashing into this old body again, heavy, cold, rigid like stone, a body that no longer felt like home. I could feel every heartbeat pounding inside my skull. Each breath felt like an earthquake tearing through me, not physical pain, but an existential shock. I had just come back from a place with no form, no borders, no names, only to be compressed into a shell defined by age, pain, rhythm, and rules. I no longer knew who I was. I remembered everything, but couldn't explain a thing. I knew what had happened, but there was no one I dared tell. I had died and realized I had lived most of my life the wrong way. The doctors called it a miraculous return. They clapped me on the back. They called me a warrior. But they had no idea I didn't come back the same. I felt more alone than I had ever felt, even in a room full of people celebrating my survival. Because I had seen what they hadn't. I had heard what they couldn't. I had touched, dissolved into, and understood something no words had ever taught. I returned home. People hugged me. My wife wept. My daughter held my hand, like she was afraid I'd vanish again. But I sat there in silence, forcing a smile, while inside, I felt like a soul trapped inside a cage. I didn't know where to begin. How do you explain a formless void? How do you tell someone you're no longer who you were? How do you ask people to stop calling you Matthew, when that name now feels like nothing more than an old shell? There are nights I can't sleep. Not because of fear, but because this body feels far too small for what I now know about who I am. It's like flying across galaxies, only to be crammed back into a matchbox. I no longer fit the rhythm of my old life. The news, the competition, the petty arguments, they all feel hollow now. Every conversation seems shallow. Every worry that used to spark my anger now feels like a child's game in a world that doesn't know it's asleep. I'm not angry at them. I just no longer know where I belong. I used to dream of retirement, of peace. But now I can't be still. Not when I carry a truth no one asked for, but one I know I cannot keep to myself. Sometimes I ask myself, am I losing my mind? Was what I saw just a dying brain's final hallucination? But each time I close my eyes, I don't just remember that I returned. I return to that vastness, that dissolution, that gaze with no eyes and yet full of love. And I know, no, it wasn't a dream. It was the most real thing I've ever known. And so, I began to change. Slowly, moment by moment. I started to learn how to live again in this body, without betraying my soul. And in the next part, I'll share how a man who died came back to learn, for the first time, what it means to live. I didn't know where to begin. How do you tell someone, I died? I'm no longer who I was. But I'm still here. It sounds like a paradox. A bad joke. But it's the only truth I can honestly speak. I came back in the biological sense, but the person inside me was no longer the man who had walked out the door that fateful morning. I no longer saw the world the same way. Everything now carried a deeper dimension. The tree in my yard wasn't just a tree. It was a living expression, breathing alongside me. My wife's eyes weren't just familiar eyes. They were a universe I'd missed 1,000 times, too busy looking to truly see. I started spending more time in silence. I listened more. I no longer reacted quickly, rushed to prove myself right, and needed to defend who I was. Sometimes I'd sit and watch my daughter play, and my heart would ache not from sadness, but from the realization that I had once been physically present but never truly there. Now I sit with her, fully, without thinking about tomorrow, without planning what to do next. Just being there, breathing with her, watching her laugh, and knowing this is life. I stopped going to parties. I turned down drinking nights and shallow conversations about the news, politics, and drama. Not because I'm better than anyone, but because I can't pretend anymore. I can't go back to being the old me, the one who was always chasing, always proving, always feeling not enough. I see it now. Fullness doesn't come from the outside. It comes from being fully present with each breath. I began to write. At first, it was just journal entries. Then came letters I'd never send. Letters to my father, to my mother, to the first teacher who ever believed in me, to my 17-year-old self, the boy who was scared, lonely, and doing anything to be accepted. I wrote to the wife who endured a Matthew who was too cold to feel. I wrote to my daughter, who will grow up in a world full of noise and disconnection, but who might live differently if I show her what truly matters. I changed the way I worked. I no longer tried to save everyone like a lone hero. I listened. I saw them. I stopped rushing to fix. I let them know they are not just emergency cases. They are souls. And so am I. Some people think I've become vague, too soft. I don't argue, because I know true softness is the courage to face the truth. And being tough is often just a shell hiding a fear that hasn't yet been named. I've learned how to say I'm sorry. Not because I was wrong, but because I want a connection. I've learned how to forgive. Not because they deserved it, but because I no longer want to carry one more stone in my heart. I started talking to strangers, not about the weather, but about death, about pain, about the things they've never dared tell anyone. And strangely, they opened up. They cried. They knew I understood. No need for long explanations. I didn't become a wise man. I'm not a guru. I still wash dishes. I still make mistakes. I still lose my temper sometimes. But now I know I'm alive. And that's something I used to only pretend to be. I once thought living meant doing more, having more, knowing more. Now I know, living is knowing you're alive. And what I'm about to say next, if you've ever feared death, feared loss, or lived without really knowing why, this next part might just change how you see your whole life. If you're watching this video because you're afraid of dying, I understand. Because I used to be afraid too. Not of the moment my heart would stop, but of the feeling that I had never truly lived. I was afraid of lying down one day and realizing I hadn't loved enough, hadn't forgiven enough, hadn't been present enough. Afraid of the day my child would reach for my hand, while I was too busy checking my phone. Afraid of the day my wife would go quiet, and I wouldn't ask why. Afraid of the day my mother would pass, and I'd never sit down to listen to her talk about her childhood. I used to think death was a cut, a loss, a full stop. But now I know death is a shedding, a return, a remembering of who we truly are. And what hurts the most isn't losing a loved one. It's realizing we were never truly present with them while they were alive. That's the pain that lingers. That's the grief that grips and won't let go. So I want to tell you this. Don't wait until you die to learn how to live. Don't wait until someone is gone to start listening. Don't wait for a diagnosis to start loving your life. Don't wait until you've lost yourself to wonder who you are. You don't need a near-death experience to wake up. You don't need to die to learn how to come alive. I already walked that path for you. I've fallen, unraveled, disappeared into nothing, only to discover one truth. The meaning of life isn't in how many years we live. It's in how many moments we are fully, lovingly, consciously present. I'm not here to preach. I don't have lofty wisdom to offer. I'm just someone who died and was given the grace to come back. And if this small journey of mine helps you pause, breathe deeper, love longer, look into someone's eyes a second more, then that death was a gift. I used to believe there was nothing after death. I was logical, scientific, and skeptical of anything mystical. But after those 11 minutes, I know now, we are not just bodies, not just roles, not just names. We are aware, learning how to love inside these fragile, temporary shells. And if there's one thing I hope you carry with you after all this, let it be this: you are alive. So live like you've already died. Now it's your turn. I've shared my story, the kind of story that, if kept quietly in the heart, might remain a silent memory no one ever touches. But I chose to tell it because I know someone out there has also gone through the unexplainable. Someone has died inside long before their heartbeat stopped. Someone has glimpsed a strange light, fallen into that in-between space where life and loss blur. Maybe you've never told anyone. Maybe you have, but no one believed you. Maybe you've asked yourself, who could ever understand what I've been through? I do. And here, you'll find others who do too. If you've ever had a near-death experience, if you've ever woken up from a dream you couldn't shake, if you've felt yourself leave your body, if you've heard or seen something that doesn't belong in this world, or if you've simply stood at the edge of life and come back with a heart that no longer feels the same, tell your story. Tell it with honesty. It doesn't have to make perfect sense. It doesn't have to be polished. It just has to be real. Because you don't know who might be reading the comments right now, realizing, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. Leave your story below. And if you're not ready to share just yet, leave a single dot symbol. So I know you're here, still breathing, still listening, and maybe one day you'll be ready to speak. We're not just sharing near-death experiences. We're learning how to live again, more honestly, more deeply, more gently, and with greater awareness than ever before.